So I thought today I would go ahead and bring out my watercolor pencils. I haven't touched these in a while. I have some feelings about watercolor pencils, but I really wanted to experiment with different mediums with watercolor as I go on this journey. So I'm revisiting it just to see how I feel again since it's been some time. So before I get started on any kind of piece, I definitely want to test out these pencils. I know like watercolor markers and even specific watercolors, they're all going to behave a little bit differently. So I have these 3 oranges here, and you can kind of tell the difference in when I add water to them, like how much they're actually spreading out the color. So, and the pressure that I did put on the pencil does make a difference. I start to put lighter pressure on the pencil just to see if that's going to make a difference as to whether or not that kind of like harsh color is going to stay there or if the water's going to spread it all out. So you can see for like those top colors, the orange and green, that harsh line's kind of staying there, and I just have to decide whether or not I'm going to be okay with that when I'm working on this piece. So I have a couple of different oranges I'm going to work with. I have a couple of grays. I have this adorable Labrador, and he's eyeing this pumpkin spice pup cup. It's for him, right? It must be for dog. So I want to just play around with just a small color palette today and test out my shading with these watercolors and see how I do. So I've made my selections for color, and you can see I have a dark outline here. For watercolor pencils, one of the cool things that you can do is use your watercolor pencil to kind of cover up those pencil lines, or you can just draw with the watercolor pencil straight up. I just needed to have an outline for this, especially with the dog. I just wanted to make sure all my proportions were correct and all of those things. So for me, drawing freehand with the watercolor pencils just wasn't an option. So I now am just taking the outline with the pencil because I'm okay with those harsher lines being on the outside. It'll kind of cover up that pencil line as I work. So I'm just trying to create some volume of the cup by creating some of that darker shading on the outside and keeping it lighter on the inside for that light source and just to show its shape. So for your reference, you can see the colors that I'm using for the cup are doing an okay job of covering up those pencil lines, but you can also see the pencil does kind of blend in there too. So I'll have to do some additional layering to kind of improve the look of it. Right now, I'm not super happy with the pencil lines. I am going to use a dark gray pencil, watercolor pencil for like the whipped cream and like the outer cup, just to also help with that outline and then also to add some shading. So I'm just adding a little bit of light watercolor to the shape of the whipped cream so that you can get some of those shadows. So you're not seeing a true light, but I'm keeping a lot of the white there of the whipped cream. So while I'm waiting for the cup to dry, I'm going to start working on the dog here. And I just have a dark gray, not a pure black for the dog. And I think I'm essentially just going to stay with this one color for the dog. I'm mostly going to keep a light wash of the gray just to start. There are some areas that I'm going to keep white, such as the very top of the nose, because I do want there to be some highlights there. So I am using a reference for the dog, and I just want to have that available so I can see where the shadows are. So as I'm looking at my reference photo, I'm filling in any shadows that I can see, but I'm still keeping it really light until I'm ready to get into the deeper blacks. You can really see his face start to become more three-dimensional with the shading. The main way that I am getting the color onto my brush is by creating that darker outline in certain areas of the dog, and then I'm taking a very small amount of water and dipping it into that area so that I can add some shading to other areas. That ensures that I keep it as light as possible. I really like how the little folds of his ears turned out. Just creating that extra 3D with the shading, I think, is really coming along. So the paw is going to be really dark, so you see I went in pretty heavy with the pencil, and I'm just dipping my brush in a tiny bit of water, and I'm just blending all of that out. So these are Arteza Expert watercolor pencils, and they do blend really nicely. I will say, like I had mentioned before, that some pencils act better than others. So sometimes when I'm working with these pencils, I can try to blend something out and just be really surprised. Either it doesn't blend out the way I expect, or isn't really aesthetically pleasing to me. So giving that dog a little time to dry, I'm coming back to the cup. I'm adding a little bit more outline here with the brown. At this point, I realize I've made a mistake. I don't really like how the brown looks. The bottom part's starting to bleed in a weird, funny way that I don't like. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, about some of these colors just kind of having a weird reaction to each other, or the paper or water, whatever it might be. So here's where I start to have a little bit fun with my pencils, and I realize that they are much more vibrant when I mix them directly with water. I want to bring more color to that cup. So I add a little bit of water to the sides of the cup, and then I just take my pencil directly onto that area and let that pigment really just get on there. And you can see how bright it is compared to when I drew the lines on dry paper and then blended it out. So now that I've put my pencil on a wet surface and I've got tons and tons of pigment on there, then I can make even starker colors. Part of me is hoping that this is going to fix my shading issue with that brown, but I am unsure. So let's give that a break. We'll go back to our puppy friend, and I'm starting to build on those darker values now. So I've added some water to the areas that I know are going to be super dark, and I'm just going in there with that pencil. The more I add that darker black and blend it out, the more three-dimensional it seems like everything's getting, from the face to the paws. So I'm really happy with the shading effect of these pencils. And I'm just dragging that deep dark black pencil, and now I've got more pigment on my brush to create even darker shadows on the face. So around the eyes, on the right side of the face. So just following the reference, I'm imagining the light coming from the left somewhere. So I'm trying to make sure that things like the cup also are reflecting that light source. So I've got the main parts of the face mostly defined. I still have to work on the eyes. I'm a little nervous to get into those because they're kind of small, and I'm worried that I'm going to lose the effect with them being so tiny, but we'll see how that turns out. While I'm waiting for some of those darker areas to dry, I'm going to go ahead and create a separation between this table that the cup is sitting on and the background. So I've decided to take my brown pencil and make myself that table using the brown. And I will tell you, my mistake. Now, I should have trusted my instinct when I put this brown on that cup, and I should have picked another one, but I didn't. I kept at it. I used the brown that I said. I chose this brown, and I'm gonna stick with it. So you will see in a moment that I become quite unhappy with that decision. So the consistency of this brown is different than some of the other colors that I've used, for one. For two, you've noticed that with some of the other colors, you're not really seeing the texture of that paper super prominently, but with the brown, it really is soaking into the paper, so you're really seeing the graininess of it. So I'm going to wet the entire area with my brush, and then I'm going to go in with the pencil, and I'm going to put pigment directly on the surface of the table and make it as dark as I can, and then I'll see if I can blend it out a little bit better with all of that color on there. This is the part of this adventure where I say to myself, are you really going to post this on the internet? And I'm going to make one last attempt to be satisfied with this, or it's going to go into the pile of broken toys, so to speak. Gonna let that table dry before I make one last crack at it. So I'm gonna push the values on this dog at least one more time. So I'm gonna make those shades even darker. And with places like the ear where I might go too dark, I'm just taking my brush and lifting that paint off to leave some highlights there. So the part I'm most nervous about is the eyes, and of course, what happens is I break my pencil right as I start to work on it. Panic, pure panic. But it looks okay. I think I can salvage this. I'm going to try and blend this out really lightly. I still want some life in them, even though it's harder to convey on the smaller eyes. So now I feel like I'm really satisfied with how the dog came out, with the varying levels of light to dark. He's really looking three-dimensional, and I'm quite satisfied with him. So now, just to fix this table. So I'm going in one more time with that pencil and lots of water, and I'm going to cover it with as much brown as I possibly can. And As I get a little frustrated with how muddy and icky the table's looking, I just decide to take my pencil and just kind of scratch at it to hopefully give it some texture like wood or something like that. And here's what it winds up looking like when it's dry. Even though I was really not happy with that brown at first, I'm not that mad about the texture that I was able to add using my pencil. And I definitely got to play around with a technique with watercolor pencils I actually have not tried before. Let me know what you think about the watercolor pencils. Do you like the versatility of these pencils or the effects that they can bring to a piece like this? Let me know. And with that, I will say goodbye for now. Bye-bye.